When listening to historians and people who work within the historical profession, museum curators, archivists, and people like that, you may hear the term historiography brought up, and you may be wondering what that term historiography means. Hopefully, this video will explain that for you. Historiography, simply stated, is the history of historical writing. And if you want to get a little bit more specific, it's about changing interpretations of history. And what I mean by that, not changing interpretations of history in a general sense necessarily, but changing interpretations of a given event, a given person, a given idea. So, historiography looks into the change over time in historical interpretations. That's primarily what it does. There are different interpretations of different events. A lot of people, you'll hear them complain about so called revisionist history and how it's destroying the past and our understanding of it. It's important to remember that a lot of times history has been written by the winners, and sometimes they write history in a way that makes them look really good. We can go back to ancient kings and emperors who, for example, threw up massive stone reliefs with all sorts of writing on them. And most of the time, those massive public monuments were erected in order to make the king or the emperor look good, to include all of his great, and it's usually his great exploits in conquering other peoples, and then maybe being nice to them, maybe not being nice to them. But it's to basically solidify their position, their reign, justify their position, those kinds of things. And sometimes, a lot of times, they're not entirely accurate. So, why would we need to revise things in the present? In some instances, this will be because new information becomes available. If you look back at the Cold War era, a lot of things that are held in government repositories are what we would call classified or top secret, and researchers are not allowed to get into those for a while, for many years. And over time, some of those classified documents will become released to the public, and then researchers can come in and look at those documents, and it can give people a fuller understanding of what was going on. In other instances, there might be something lying in a dark, dusty archive somewhere that nobody's looked at in 100 years, and then subsequent information that we get may shed more light on what those documents are saying. So revising something might be something that is entirely appropriate, and it may change our entire understanding of something in the past. And there's nothing necessarily inherently nefarious going on at that point. Now, some people try to use the past, a lot of people try to use the past perhaps for ideological purposes. That's not necessarily the case. But why do we look at history in general? We look at it to sort of give us an understanding of why things are the way they are. Historians look at various disparate threads and see how they tie together to bring us from point A to point B to where we are today. So that is why historiography is important. If you're looking to write history, understanding historiography can be a good idea, because it's not a good idea to go and ask the same questions and come up with the same answers in the same way that other people have done so in the past. You may have a new question that would be worth looking into. You may have a new answer that is, very plausible based upon the evidence that you can find, and that's worth looking at and worth publishing if it adds to our understanding of why things are the way they are. So historians write about history, they interpret past events through evidence, and those understandings, those interpretations can change over time, which leads to the historiographical landscape that we have today. A lot of topics will have a sort of traditional view or an orthodox view of a given event or period, and then sometimes people will come in and come up with a revisionist interpretation, or revisionist interpretations. And then sometimes people find those lacking, and you'll have post revisionism. And that is not all that uncommon in a lot of topics. So, one of the ways you can understand how the historiography has changed over time on a given topic, if you have access to a research library, you can go and look up historiographical essays. I know for one graduate class I took on Stuart England back several years ago, the instructor assigned a book called Debates in Stuart History. And we looked at the historiography and how historians had interpreted various things, largely revolving around the English Reformation and things like that. So, anyway, hopefully, this will give you an idea of what historiography is. It is basically just the history of changing interpretations of history. And hopefully, it helps us come to a better understanding of why the past is important and how we have gotten to where we are in society today. So, hopefully, it's helpful. And thanks for watching.